The study titled, quote, Finasteride 1 milligram daily administration on male androgenetic alopecia in different age groups 10-year follow-up, unquote, was conducted by Rossi et al. At the Department of Dermatology and Plastic Surgery, University Sapienza of Rome, and CASPER, the Inter-University Consortium for Supercomputing, Rome, Italy. The research aimed to assess the long-term efficacy and safety of finasteride in treating male androgenetic alopecia over a 10-year period. The study was an uncontrolled long-term trial involving 118 men aged 20 to 61 years, diagnosed with mild to moderate androgenetic alopecia. These men were in good physical and mental health, as the study states, and the study went on to exclude individuals with significant physical or laboratory abnormalities, as well as those who had prior surgical correction of their hair loss via hair transplantation, those who used topical minoxidil within the last year, consumed drugs with androgenic or anti-androgenic properties, or had hair loss causes other than androgenetic alopecia. Each participant was administered 1 milligram per day of finasteride. The treatment's efficacy was gauged through a standardized global photograph taken at the start, the baseline, and then after 1, 2, 5, and 10 years of treatment. These photographs were evaluated by a panel of 3 experts, including 2 experienced dermatologists and 1 junior dermatologist, who compared the photographs and assigned a score from -3, the greatest decrease, to +3, the greatest increase of hairs compared to baseline. The results indicated that finasteride is effective in treating male pattern baldness. Notably, better improvements were observed in patients older than 30 years and those with higher androgenetic alopecia grades. About 42.8% of patients aged between 20 and 30 years showed no improvement even after 10 years. In contrast, patients with androgenetic alopecia grade 4 and 5 started showing improvements after just 1 year of treatment. Interestingly, the study found that continuing treatment beyond 5 years led to better results in 21% of cases. By the way, when I said 42.8% of patients between age 20 and 30 years of age showed no improvement after 10 years, this is about improvement of hair growth. So it's essentially saying people did not gain hair. They were just at the same spot where they started, essentially. So, in other words, these people were stabilized at their current point of hair loss and may have even experienced some sort of thickening up of hair. In addition to the grade 4 and grade 5, and I'm assuming this is the Norwood grade 4, Norwood grade 5 patients that were taking finasteride, it stated that they started showing improvements after just 1 year of treatment. And it could be the case that they started showing improvements because they didn't have that much hair to begin with. This could be due to there being a significant improvement of hair that is to be gained once it is gained in those who have gone without it for an extended period of time. So in other words, if hair is to be gained, the differences is more dramatic in, say, a Norwood 4 versus a Norwood 1. The efficacy of finasteride did not diminish over time. In fact, many patients who did not show improvement in the first year experienced positive results later on. So this is why for people who complain about not seeing improvements within the first year, don't stop using the drug. You may very well get improvements a year and a half, maybe 2 years into treatment. So just stick with it. A small percentage of patients experience side effects related to sexual function, which in some cases led to discontinuation of the treatment. Now, that's nothing new. We've already known about sexual dysfunction and side effects when it comes to using finasteride, but it is not permanent, as the post-finasteride syndrome fearmongers would say. It's not permanent, and if you look at my channel, I have other details about how to overcome side effects, but that's not the point of this video. But I digress. The study highlighted that the majority of patients who saw improvements within the first 5 years continued to maintain or improve their hair growth in the following years. Now, I want to make a quick break in here. If you can remember the 10-year long-term Japanese finasteride study, it was observed that even after 5 years, people who continued to use finasteride kept seeing more gains. So what you have to keep in mind is that your 1 year result isn't necessarily where you're going to be, right? It probably gives you an indication that you're responding. If you're shedding, right, then that means you're getting an indication that you're responding to treatment. But just because you've hit 1 year of treatment and you're not seeing improvements, it doesn't mean that you're not going to make any gains. It could be 2 years down the line. You could be having progressive shedding along the way that kind of masks how your hair follicles are recovering after getting rid of DHT. Because a lot of people don't seem to understand this, right? When you start taking finasteride or dutasteride, as soon as you lower the scalp DHT, depending on what growth state your hair follicles are currently in, what phase of the anagen phase they're in, right? It's been observed that if these hair follicles are in a similar anagen growth phase, they'll begin to synchronize their growth patterns. And again, as these hair follicles recover, as they go through their growth and shedding cycles, they'll become more normalized and eventually lose that sort of synchronized nature to them. So when you look at the Japanese study and that graph that's in there, you can see that over time, people are above baseline, but you have these like periods where, hair count goes up, hair count goes down, but overall, the trend is upward in terms of hair count and hair improvement. And we're going to go back to the Rossi study that I was talking about, the 10-year finasteride efficacy study in Italy. The Rossi study sort of reiterates what the Japanese study showed us. The Rossi et al. Study provides detailed data on the progression of hair growth in patients treated with finasteride over 10 years, particularly highlighting the differences observed at 1 year, 5 years, and 10 years. What we find is that after the first year of treatment, there was a notable improvement in some patients. The study particularly emphasizes that the first year can be somewhat predictive of the treatment's overall effectiveness. So if you start shedding, if you start growing some hair, this shows that you may be a responder, but it doesn't necessarily say that people who don't necessarily have a huge growth rate or a huge growth response aren't going to see any improvements. It was observed that older patients, like I mentioned before earlier, and those with higher androgenetic alopecia grades responded better in the first year compared to younger patients and those with lower androgenetic alopecia grades. By the 5th year, there was a continuation and in some cases, an improvement in hair growth for those who had shown positive results in the first year. For those who did not observe improvements in the first year, about 25% showed improvements by the end of the 5th year. The persistence of hair growth or further improvement in hair quality was a significant factor among patients who initially responded well to the treatment. At the 10-year mark, the study observed that patients who showed improvement in the first year had a higher probability, 68%, of further improvement or at least maintaining their hair growth. However, there was a noted decline in the effectiveness for some patients between the 5th year and the 10th year. This decline was not predominant but was significant enough to be noted. Approximately 14% of the patients experienced a worsening of their hair condition by the 10th year. Now, despite this decline for a subset of patients, the overall effectiveness of finasteride at the 10-year mark was still higher compared to the first year. This suggests that while some patients may experience a decrease in effectiveness of the treatment over time, the majority either maintained or improved their hair growth. Now, when looking at the tables, you may notice that there is a decline in hair counts between year 5 and 10. However, overall, year 10 is better than year 1, the baseline. There may be some reasons for this decline between year 5 and 10. The observed decline in hair growth effectiveness between the 5th and 10th years of finasteride treatment, as reported in the study, could indeed be influenced by factors such as seasonal shedding, general aging, a desynchronization from the 5th year of hair growth, and finally, although DHT's effects were significantly slowed down in some patients, it could be finally catching up to these patients. Because we know that finasteride at 1 milligram or 5 milligram only decreases scalp DHT by 40%. So for these men who are observing a decline in hair count or hair growth between year 5 and 10, but still being above their baseline year 1, they may be candidates for dutasteride. because you can achieve a greater degree of scalp DHT suppression depending on the dose range between 0.5 milligram dutasteride up to 2.5 milligram dutasteride. And within those milligram dosing ranges, right, at one of those doses a day, you can suspect a decrease of scalp DHT between 50% for 0.5 milligram dutasteride a day, up to 80% for 2.5 milligram dutasteride a day. So this decline in apparent effectiveness offers a more nuanced understanding of the long-term effects of finasteride treatment. But overall, the study's findings were very positive. Patients on average remained significantly above their baseline in terms of hair growth and quality after 10 years of continuous finasteride treatment. And this only goes to underscore the long-term effectiveness of finasteride in managing androgenetic alopecia, with most patients maintaining or improving their hair growth compared to their initial state before beginning their treatment.